Some scandals are whispered in back rooms. Others explode under the glare of 1,000 flashbulbs. For Damian Westwood, a man who built an empire on predicting market trends, the one trend he never saw coming was his own spectacular downfall. On a night draped in diamonds and champagne at the Metropolitan Museum charity gala, he committed an act so publicly vile, so callously cruel that it would sever his life in two. He shoved his pregnant wife, Reagan, to appease his mistress. But the real story isn't the shove that the whole world saw. It's what happened hours later in the dead of night, when the gates of his own magnificent estate swung shut, and the man who thought he owned the world was escorted off his property like a common trespasser. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a story of consequence, of a secret power held by the woman he tried to break, and the night a titan of industry learned what it truly meant to be left with nothing. The air in the grand hall of the Metropolitan Museum was thick with the scent of money, a heady perfume of expensive florals, vintage champagne, and the collective ambition of New York City's elite. It was the annual charity gala, the undisputed pinnacle of the social calendar, where fortunes were pledged on silent auction carts and reputations were made or shattered between the appetizer and the main course. From the outside, Damian and Reagan Westwood were the evening's crowning jewels. He was Damian Westwood, the CEO of Westwood Holdings, a real estate and tech conglomerate that had reshaped the city's skyline. He was tall with a mane of dark hair, just starting to silver at the temples, a feature the society pages called distinguished. His smile, a practiced lethal weapon, could close $1 billion deal or charm the most cynical journalist. Tonight he wore a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, the fabric so fine it seemed tough to drink the light. She was Reagan Westwood née Davies, where Damian was sharp angles and predatory grace. Reagan was soft-spoken elegance and quiet intelligence. An architectural historian by training, she had a discerning eye that could see the soul of a building, a skill she now applied to navigating the fragile structures of high society. Tonight, she was breathtaking in a deep sapphire gown by Oscar de la Renta that flowed over her body, artfully draping over the gentle swell of her 5-month pregnancy. A cascade of diamonds, the Westwood stars, glittered at her throat, a previous anniversary gift that now felt less like a token of love and more like a beautiful diamond-studded collar. To the casual observer, they were a portrait of success. But up close, the canvas was cracked. For the past hour, Damian had been holding court, his hand never straying far from the small of Reagan's back in a proprietary gesture that was purely for the cameras. But his eyes, those sharp, calculating grey eyes, were constantly scanning the room. Reagan knew who he was looking for. She had known for 6 agonizing months. Her name was Roxanne Croft. Roxanne was everything Reagan wasn't. She was 26 Epirona, in the guise of a social media influencer, with a manufactured pout and a body sculpted by discipline and a surgeon's knife. She'd started as a junior marketing associate at Westwood Holdings, and within a year she was on Damian's arm at private corporate events, and soon after in his bed. Tonight she was a vision in blood-red silk, a stark, deliberate contrast to Reagan's serene blue. She wasn't at their table, of course, that would be too brazen even for Damian, but she was strategically placed at a nearby one, surrounded by a coterie of sycophants, her laughter just a little too loud, her gaze a little too possessive whenever it landed on their table. Darling Damian murmured, his voice a low thrum against her ear, his breath smelling of whiskey. "You haven't said a word for 10 minutes. People will think you're bored. It wasn't a question of concern. It was a command. Perform. Reagan forced a smile, the muscles in her face feeling stiff. I'm just taking it all in, Damian. It's quite the spectacle. She took a delicate sip of her sparkling water. The baby gave a gentle flutter inside her, a small secret comfort. Gideon Pierce is staring. Damian noted his jaw tightening slightly as he glanced across the room. Gideon Pierce was his chief rival, a bulldog of a man who ran a competing firm. He looks like he's waiting for one of us to trip. Don't give him the satisfaction. Reagan's smile became a little more genuine, tinged with irony. I have no intention of tripping. The evening wore on, a torturous parade of fake smiles and stilted conversations. Reagan felt like a ghost haunting her own life. She watched Damian glad-hand a senator, his laughter booming, while she discussed 18th century Parisian architecture with a woman whose face was pulled so tight she seemed perpetually surprised. All the while, the invisible string between Damian and Roxanne seemed to pull tighter, a tangible force in the glittering room. Reagan could see the smirks they exchanged over the tops of champagne flutes, the way his eyes would follow Roxanne as she moved through the crowd. The trouble began during the live auction. A lavish 7-day yacht trip through the Greek Isles was on the block. The bidding was fierce, quickly climbing into the 6 figures. "Let's get it," Damian said, suddenly, grabbing his bidding paddle. "A baby moon. It'll be perfect." Reagan looked at him, truly looked at him for the first time all night. The suggestion was so audacious, so utterly detached from the cold reality of their marriage, that she felt a bubble of hysterical laughter rise in her throat. A baby moon, as if they were a normal, happy couple anticipating the arrival of their child, and not a man his wife, and the spectre of his mistress, all breathing the same recycled air. Before she could form a reply, Roxanne made her move. She glided over to their table, a vision in crimson, her smile wit and predatory. "Damian, darling," she purred, completely ignoring Reagan. "My table is simply dying to know if the rumors are true. Are you really planning to break ground on the new celestial tower before Christmas?" Her hand rested familiarly on his shoulder, her long red nails a stark contrast against the black of his tuxedo. It was a power play, executed in front of God and everyone. She was marking her territory. The nearby tables fell into a hushed silence, all eyes on the tableau. This was the drama they had paid thousands of dollars to see. Damian, caught between his public image and his private indiscretions, stiffened. He was a man who hated being cornered. "Roxanne," he said, his voice a low warning. "We're in the middle of the auction." "Oh, don't be such a bore." She laughed, a tinkling sound that grated on Reagan's nerves. She leaned in closer, her lips almost touching his ear, whispering something that made a slow, dark smile spread across Damian's face. Reagan felt a cold dread wash over her. It was one thing to endure the private humiliation, the knowledge of his betrayal. It was another to have it flaunted so publicly, to be rendered invisible in her own chair, while her husband was seduced in plain sight. The baby kicked harder this time, as if sensing its mother's distress. That was it. She couldn't sit there for one more second. Slowly, gracefully, she placed her napkin on the table and rose. "If you'll excuse me," she said, her voice quiet but clear, cutting through the charged air. "I need some air." She didn't look at Damian, but she felt his irritation, a palpable wave of anger. Her leaving was an indictment, a crack in the perfect facade. She turned to walk away, her back straight, her head held high. What happened next seemed to unfold in surreal slow motion. "Reagan, sit down." Damian commanded, his voice a harsh whisper. She ignored him, taking another step. Roxanne, seeing her prize momentarily distracted, chose that moment to up the ante. "Let her go, Damian. She's probably just feeling emotional. You know the hormones." She let out a small, condescending laugh. That was the spark that lit the fuse. Damian, enraged at being publicly managed by both his wife and his mistress, reacted with the brutish instinct of a cornered animal. He stood up, intending to grab Reagan's arm, to physically pull her back into her seat and restore his semblance of control. But he misjudged the distance. He misjudged his own alcohol-fueled frustration. He misjudged the slight shift in Reagan's balance as she turned. His hand didn't grab her arm. It shoved. It was a hard, impatient push to her shoulder. For a woman not carrying the precious weight of a child, it might have resulted in a stumble. For Reagan, 5 months pregnant and caught off guard, it was catastrophic. She cried out a small gasp of shock and fear as her heel caught on the leg of a chair. She pinwheeled backwards, her arms flailing for something to hold on to. The sapphire gown swirled around her as she fell, a collapsing constellation of blue silk and shattered dignity. She landed hard on her side, the impact jarring through her entire body. The collective gasp of the hundreds of onlookers was like the sound of the tide being sucked out to sea, leaving behind a silent, horrified shore. For a moment, there was no sound but the frantic clicking of cameras as photographers, smelling blood in the water, captured the image that would be on the front page of every tabloid. By morning, Damian Westwood, titan of industry, standing over his fallen pregnant wife, while his mistress in red looked on with a flicker of triumph in her eyes. In that frozen moment, as a sharp, terrifying pain shot through her abdomen, Reagan looked up at her husband. She saw no remorse in his eyes, only fury. Fury at her for creating a scene, for embarrassing him. And in his eyes, she saw the end of everything, and the beginning of something else. The silence in the grand hall lasted for what felt like an eternity, a vacuum of shock that sucked all the air from the room. Then chaos erupted. People surged to their feet. A woman screamed. Waitstaff rushed forward, their professionalism warring with their horror. Gideon Pierce, Damian's rival, was one of the first to reach Reagan. He knelt beside her, his usual smug expression replaced by one of genuine concern. "Reagan, are you all right? Don't move." "Someone call a doctor." Damian seemed to snap out of his stupor, the gravity of his public act finally piercing his whiskey-fueled rage. The flashbulbs were like relentless accusatory strobes, searing the moment into history. "Reagan." "My God," he blustered, rushing to her side and trying to wave Pierce away. "Get away from her. It was an accident." She stumbled, but Reagan wasn't looking at him. Her eyes were wide with fear. One hand instinctively clutching her stomach, where the sharp pain was now a dull, terrifying ache. 2 medically trained Gala attendees, a surgeon and a nurse, were already there, gently assessing her. "I'm fine," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if it was true. I need to go." The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that spread across her skin. The shove was bad enough. The pity in the eyes of her peers was unbearable. Damian was in full damage control mode, his voice loud and performative. "Of course, darling. Let's get you home. Everyone, please give us some space. My wife is pregnant. She just felt faint, and I tried to catch her. The lie was so bald, so pathetic, that a low murmur of disbelief rippled through the crowd. Everyone had seen it. The shove, the anger. Roxanne Croft, realizing she was now at the center of a PR nuclear blast, had already begun to discreetly melt back into the crowd, her face a mask of panicked innocence. A security detail from the museum helped Reagan to her feet. She refused to take Damian's offered hand instead, leaning on the arm of a stoic security guard. "I'll take my own car," she said, her voice low and steady, a stark contrast to Damian's frantic energy. "Don't be ridiculous, Reagan," he hissed, trying to steer her toward the exit. "We'll leave together. We need to present a united front." She stopped and looked at him. The look in her eyes was not one of sadness or betrayal. It was something colder, something harder. It was the look of a decision being made. "No, Damian. We don't." She walked away, a small regal procession of 2 security guards and the concerned nurse, leaving him standing alone in the wreckage of his own making. The flashbulbs followed her out, but then they swung back to him, hungry for the next chapter of the drama. The ride home to their sprawling estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, was a study in transformation. The initial shock and fear for her baby began to recede, replaced by a glacial calm. The pain in her side had subsided to a throbbing reminder of the violation. But a quick, discreet call to her obstetrician from the back of the car had reassured her that unless the pain worsened or other symptoms appeared, the baby was likely cushioned and safe. The doctor's calm voice was a balm, allowing Reagan's mind to shift from fear to focus. She didn't cry. The time for tears was long past, wasted over months of lonely nights and suspicious text messages. The public humiliation was not the wound, it was the anesthetic. It had numbed her to any lingering hope, any last shred of affection she might have harbored for the man she had once loved. The shove was not an act of passion, it was an act of convenience. He had pushed her aside physically and metaphorically to clear the path to what he truly wanted. And in the silent leather-clad cocoon of the chauffeured Maybach, Reagan Westwood decided that she was done being pushed. She pulled out her phone. Her thumb hovered over her contacts before she pressed the first name. The phone only rang once. "Walter," she said, her voice perfectly even. Reagan, the voice on the other end, replied. It was her maternal grandfather, Walter Davies. He was 86, with a mind as sharp as a diamond cutter. He was old money, the quiet kind, built on patents and shrewd, century-old investments, not the flashy, brittle kind Damian represented. I saw the alert from the Times. "Are you and the little one all right?" He was always direct. "We're all right, Grandpa. A little shaken, but we're fine." "Good," he said the single word, carrying the weight of immense relief. "Then it's time." "It's time," Reagan confirmed, a sliver of steel entering her voice. "The arrangements are in place as they have been for the last year. Anya is ready. Mr. Henderson is on site. You just need to give the word." "Consider it given," she said. "I'm 10 minutes out." "I'm proud of you, Kate," he said, softly. "Your grandmother would be too. She never did like men who confused bluster with strength." A single hot tear finally escaped Reagan's eye, but she wiped it away fiercely. "Thank you, Grandpa. I'll call you tomorrow." She disconnected and immediately dialed her second number. "Anya Sharma speaking." The voice was crisp, efficient, and devoid of fluff. Anya was the head of family law at the most fearsome legal firm in the state. Anya. It's Reagan Westwood. Reagan. I've been alerted. Walter called me a few minutes ago. Are you certain? He shoved me Anya. He shoved his pregnant wife in front of 200 people so his mistress wouldn't be inconvenienced. Reagan stated the facts, laid out like cold, hard evidence. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Understood, Anya said. The morality clause of the prenuptial agreement is now active. The paperwork is prepared. Mr. Henderson of Citadel Security has been given his instructions, effective upon your arrival at the property. All assets held within the Davies family trust, including the Greenwich estate and its contents, are now under your sole and exclusive control. His access has been revoked. Reagan closed her eyes, a wave of dizzying finality washing over her. Thank you, Anya. Just get inside and lock the doors, Reagan. We'll handle the rest. Meanwhile, Damian was in his own car, fuming. Roxanne was beside him, having slithered out a side exit to meet him. Can you believe the nerve of her? Roxanne fumed, reapplying her lipstick in the vanity mirror. Walking out like that, making you look like a monster. She's so manipulative. Damian wasn't listening. He was on the phone with his head of PUR, a man named Rick. Just kill it, Damian snarled into the phone. I don't care what it costs. Call the editors. Call the publishers. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. A dizzy spell, I was helping her. Damian, it's everywhere. Rick's panicked voice crackled back. Video is already going viral. Billionaire shoves pregnant wife. It's not good. Then make it good, he roared, throwing his phone onto the opposite seat in disgust. He rubbed his temples, the whiskey buzz, having curdled into a vicious headache. He was furious with Reagan. How dare she embarrass him like this? He'd smooth it over, of course. He always did. He'd buy her a new necklace, a bigger one this time. Maybe a car. She'd cry a little, he'd apologize with half-hearted sincerity. And then life would go on. He was Damian Westwood. Life always went on his terms. Don't worry, baby, Roxanne cooed, sliding her hand onto his thigh. She'll get over it. Once you're home, you can handle her. Yeah, Damian muttered, his confidence slowly returning. Yeah, I'll handle her. 40 minutes later, his Bentley crested the hill leading to his estate. The place was his sanctuary, his monument to himself. A 25,000-square-foot Georgian mansion on 50 acres of pristine Connecticut waterfront. He'd supervised every detail of its renovation after he and Reagan had married. It was the ultimate symbol of his power. As they approached the main gates, massive wrought-iron monstrosities, he pressed the remote. Nothing happened. He pressed it again, harder this time. The gates remained shut. What the hell, he muttered. He could see the lights on in the main house, a warm, inviting glow against the night sky. Reagan's Maybach was parked in the circular driveway. He laid on the horn, a long, angry blast. After a moment, a figure emerged from the gatehouse, not the usual friendly night guard, but a man in a severe black suit. Damian recognized him vaguely. Mr. Henderson, the head of the private security firm Reagan's family used for their various properties. Henderson walked calmly to the driver's side window. Damian powered it down his face, a mask of indignation. Henderson, what's the problem? Open the damn gate. Mr. Henderson looked at him with an unnervingly calm expression. His eyes were flat, impassive. He held a tablet in his hand. "Good evening, Mr. Westwood," he said, his voice polite but firm. "I'm afraid I can't do that." Damian stared at him, dumbfounded. "What do you mean you can't do that? I own this place. You work for me." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Henderson's lips. "That is a common misconception, sir. My firm, Citadel Security, is contracted by the Davies Family Trust, which is the legal owner of this property. My duty is to the trust and its designated beneficiary." Roxanne in the passenger seat looked confused. "The what?" Damian felt a cold knot of dread begin to form in his stomach. "What the hell are you talking about?" "This is my house, according to the legal directives I received at 9:47 p.m. this evening from Ms. Anya Sharma on behalf of the beneficiary, Mrs. Reagan Westwood." Henderson continued his tone, as unforgiving as a legal document. "Your access privileges to this property have been permanently revoked." He turned his head slightly, gesturing back toward the mansion that glowed under the moonlight, a fortress Damian himself had perfected. Mr. Westwood Henderson said, his voice dropping to a quiet, final tone. "You are no longer welcome on this property. I must ask you to leave immediately." Damian stared at Mr. Henderson, the polite, firm words failing to penetrate the thick wall of his indignation. The world as Damian Westwood knew it did not operate this way. Gates opened for him, doors unlocked, people yielded. The suggestion that he, in his own driveway, at the foot of his own palatial home, could be denied entry was so fundamentally absurd it bordered on the comical. "Are you insane?" Damian's voice was dangerously low, a coiled serpent of fury. "This is a joke, a stupid, vindictive little game Reagan is playing because she's hormonal and embarrassed. I demand you put her on the intercom. Now!" Mr. Henderson, a man whose placid expression suggested he had faced down far worse than an irate billionaire, did not move a muscle. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, a monolith in a perfectly tailored suit. "Mrs. Westwood has left explicit instructions not to be disturbed, sir. She is resting." "Resting?" Damian let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. "She's not resting. She's plotting. This is pathetic, even for her." He leaned out the window, his face contorted with scorn. "Henderson, let's be clear. My name is on the checks that pay your salary. My company's security contracts are worth millions. You work for me. Now, for the last time, open this damn gate before I make one phone call and ensure you're directing traffic in a mall parking lot in Ohio by tomorrow morning." The threat, one that had humbled senators and terrified rivals, simply dissipated in the cool night air. Henderson's expression remained unchanged, but there was a subtle shift in his eyes, a glint of something that looked almost like pity. "That is a common misconception," Sir Henderson said, his tone as even as a frozen lake. "My firm, Citadel Security, is not contracted by you nor by Westwood Holdings. Our client is and has always been the Davies Family Trust." The words hung in the space between them. From the passenger seat, Roxanne, who had been watching the exchange with a mixture of amusement and impatience, finally spoke up. "The what? What is he talking about?" "Damian. A trust." Damian ignored her. A cold, slithering dread was beginning to snake its way up his spine, far more chilling than the night air. The Davies Family Trust. He remembered the name from the mountain of paperwork he'd blithely signed before the wedding. He had assumed it was some dusty old entity managing Reagan's inheritance, a few stocks, maybe a summer cottage in Maine. Nothing of consequence. The trust owns this property. Mr. Westwood Henderson continued, as if sensing the gears of confusion and horror grinding in Damian's mind. It has been the legal owner for over 60 years. Your wife Reagan, as the primary beneficiary, holds sole authority over residential access. As of approximately 1 hour ago, she invoked her rights under that authority. He lifted a tablet, the screen glowing with what looked like a legal document. According to the directive I received at 9:47 p.m. this evening from Ms. Anya Sharma, on behalf of Mrs. Westwood, your access privileges to the property at 1100 Cove Road, and all associated structures have been permanently and irrevocably revoked. Revoked. The word was a hammer blow. It was the word used for credit cards, for driver's licenses, for disgraced memberships. It was not a word that applied to him. This is theft, Damian sputtered, his voice cracking. I renovated this house. I poured a fortune into it. The marble in that foyer is from a quarry in Carrara. I selected myself. That's my home. With all due respect, sir. Henderson said, his voice retaining its maddening calm. You have been residing here as a guest of Mrs. Westwood. A long-term guest, certainly, but a guest nonetheless. A guest. The word struck him with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. For 5 years he had strode through those halls, hosted global figures, and ruled his domain with the absolute certainty of an emperor. And all along in the cold, hard letter of the law, he had been nothing more than a visitor. A guest who had just committed the ultimate faux pas at the dinner party. His phone buzzed violently in the center console, a frantic, angry vibration. He snatched it up, desperate for a lifeline, a connection to the world where he was still in charge. The caller ID was a name he knew, but had never spoken to. Anya Sharma, Reagan's lawyer. He jabbed the screen to answer his voice, a venomous hiss. You've got a lot of damn nerve, Mr. Westwood. Anya's voice was as cool, sharp, and sterile as a surgeon's scalpel. I trust Mr. Henderson has explained the immediate situation. I am simply calling to formalize it, so there are no lingering misunderstandings that might lead to any unpleasantness with law enforcement. Unpleasantness? Damian's voice rose to a near shriek. You've locked me out of my house. Correction, Anya said, her tone clinical. We have secured Mrs. Westwood's house, as per the prenuptial agreement you signed on May the 12th, 2020. I'd refer you to Section 4, subsection B, regarding acts of public humiliation or physical endangerment directed at either party. A breach of this clause, as has been witnessed by several hundred individuals and countless recording devices this evening, triggers several non-negotiable consequences, the first of which is Mrs. Westwood's right to exclusive and immediate possession of her primary residence. I'll fight this. Damian seethed the words, feeling hollow, even as he said them. I'll drag this through every court in the country. I'll bleed you dry. A faint dry sound came through the phone. Something that might have been a humorless chuckle. I wouldn't advise that. Discovery would be extensive. But since you brought up finances, let's talk about your renovations. We have meticulous records of your expenditures. The prenuptial agreement is quite clear. Any financial contributions to pre-existing non-marital assets are to be legally defined as gifts to the trust. It was very generous of you, Mr. Westwood. You've significantly increased the value of your wife's property. The sheer calculated brilliance of it was suffocating. He had been outmaneuvered from the very beginning, checkmated by a quiet old man, and a legal document he had dismissed as a trifle. Now Anya's voice turned a shade harder. Mr. Henderson, as an agent of the trust, has the authority to have you cited for trespassing. Given the events of tonight, I imagine your board of directors would prefer you not add a mugshot to your burgeoning public relations crisis. I strongly advise you to leave quietly. A courier will deliver the full legal notice to your office in the morning. Good night, Mr. Westwood. The line went dead, leaving a silence in the car that was louder than any shouting. Damian sat clutching his phone, his knuckles white. He was breathing heavily, his mind a maelstrom of rage, humiliation, and burgeoning panic. He stared past Henderson's impassive form at the mansion on the hill. His kingdom. The warm lights in the windows, which had seemed so inviting moments before, now felt like triumphant eyes mocking him. He could picture Reagan inside, perhaps standing by the grand bay window in the living room, watching this entire pathetic drama unfold. The image was so emasculating it made him physically ill. Damian Roxanne's voice was small, tentative, laced with a fear that was rapidly replacing her earlier excitement. The fantasy of the all-powerful billionaire was crumbling before her very eyes. The man beside her wasn't a titan. He was a man arguing with a security guard, a man being lectured by a lawyer over the phone. The allure of his power was predicated on it being absolute. This was pathetic. So what do we do? Where do we go? He turned to look at her. Really look at her for the first time since they'd left the gala. Her face, framed by the garish red of her dress, was a mask of naked, opportunistic concern. She wasn't worried about him. She was worried about her situation, about what this collapse meant for her. She was the catalyst, the cheap thrill for which he had just incinerated his entire life. A wave of revulsion, directed as much at himself as at her, washed over him. He spat the word, dripping with venom. There is no we. There was never a we. You were a diversion, an accessory, and now you're an accomplice to a disaster. Roxanne recoiled, her carefully constructed pout twisting into a snarl of indignation. How is this my fault? You were the one who pushed your pregnant wife in front of the entire world. Because of you, he roared, finally unleashing the full force of his frustration on the only available target. Because you couldn't stay at your table. You had to come over. You had to perform to stake your claim on something that was never yours. You're nothing but a cheap, ambitious parasite, and you're a fool. She shot back, her voice rising. A weak fool who just got outplayed by the little wife you thought you could walk all over. You're not powerful, Damian. You're just a bully who lost control. Her words hit him harder than any of Anya Sharma's legal jargon. He stared at her, his chest heaving. Get out! What she whispered, her bravado vanishing. Get out of my car. He enunciated each word with cold, deliberate fury. Her face crumpled. You can't be serious. You're just going to leave me here, on the side of the road, in the middle of the night. I don't have a home to take you to. Do I? He sneered, the cruelty a balm on his wounded pride. You wanted the thrill of sleeping with a king. Well, the king has just been dethroned at his own gate. The thrill is gone. Call an Uber. I'm sure your followers would love the story. With a sound that was half a sob and half a gasp of outrage, Roxanne scrambled out of the Bentley. She stood on the perfectly manicured grass verge, her crimson dress a slash of color against the darkness, shivering as the reality of her situation set in. Damian didn't give her a second glance. He wrenched the steering wheel, the Bentley executing a savage three-point turn, its expensive tires squealing a protest on the pristine asphalt. He sped away into the darkness, leaving Roxanne, Mr. Henderson, and his entire life behind him. As he drove, his phone began to light up with a relentless barrage of calls. The chairman of his board, his CFO, his frantic head of PR, he ignored them all. He was a ship taking on water, and the rats were calling to ask why the deck was wet. Inside the mansion, the heavy front door clicked shut. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home echoing in the cavernous marble foyer. Reagan stood there for a long moment in the silence, her back pressed against the cool wood. She closed her eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. It was done. She walked slowly through the ground floor, her hand trailing along the wall. This was the space Damian had remade in his own image, all gleaming surfaces, sharp angles, and cold, imposing art. He had stripped away the warmth her grandmother had cultivated, calling it cluttered and dated. He had called it an upgrade. Now Reagan saw it for what it was, a hollow monument to a hollow man. From the bay window in the living room, shrouded in darkness, she could see the distant red taillights of the Bentley as it sped away down the long, winding drive. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a profound, aching sadness for the man she had once loved, and an immense, bone-deep relief that the ordeal was finally over. She placed a hand on her belly, where her child rested safe and unaware. "It's just us now, little one," she whispered into the quiet of the house, "and we're going to be okay." She was no longer a guest. She was the protector of this house, this legacy, and the future growing inside her. She had finally come home. The first light of dawn was a dirty grey filtering through the blackout curtains of the hotel suite. Damian Westwood woke with a jolt, his heart hammering against his ribs. For a disorienting moment, he didn't know where he was. The air was stale, smelling of old room service and expensive whiskey. This wasn't his bedroom with its vaulted ceiling and panoramic views of the Long Island Sound. This was a sterile, anonymous cage. Then the events of the previous night crashed down on him with the force of a physical blow. The glittering gala, the condescending laugh from Roxanne, the look of shock on Reagan's face, the sickening thud of her fall, and the final ignominious standoff at the gates of his own home. He stumbled out of bed, his custom tuxedo a wrinkled, pathetic shell of its former glory. He flicked on the giant television, hoping for a distraction, but found only an echo chamber of his own ruin. Every major news network was leading with his story. There it was, on a massive high-definition screen, the video. A high-angle shot from a guest's phone, grainy, but undeniable. The shove. It was brutal, unequivocal. There was no room for interpretation, no way to spin it as an accident. A panel of talking heads dissected his character, like vultures. A shocking display of arrogance and cruelty, one commentator said. This goes beyond a marital dispute. It speaks to a fundamental flaw in judgment, another added. The ticker at the bottom of the screen told the rest of the story. Westwood Holdings, WSTW, plummets in pre-market trading amid CEO scandal. He felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. They were crucifying him. He, Damian Westwood, who had bent this city to his will, was being reduced to a 2-minute segment on morning television. He snatched his phone, his thumb flying to Reagan's contact. He needed to fix this, to command her to release a joint statement to make this go away. The call went straight to a voicemail he didn't recognize. "You have reached the voicemail of Reagan Davies," her voice said, calm and impossibly professional. "Please leave a message. Davies." She had dropped his name. The finality of it was like a door slamming shut in a long, dark hallway. He called again, and again. Each time the same cool, detached voice met him, a stranger who had once shared his bed. His next call was to his lawyer, Frank Levine, a legal brawler known for his scorched earth tactics. Frank Damian barked, pacing the plush carpet. "I want you to destroy her. File everything. Contest the prenup. I don't care what it costs. I want the house. I want my life back." There was a heavy sigh on the other end of the line. "Damian, I got the courier delivery from Anya Sharma an hour ago. I'm looking at the agreement now. You need to listen to me very carefully." Frank's voice, usually full of bluster, was sober. "This document, it's a fortress. It was drafted by Walter Davies's personal firm. These guys don't draft contracts. They build legal cathedrals. The Greenwich estate was never a marital asset. It was deeded to a multi-generational irrevocable trust for Reagan's benefit, before you were even in the picture. Your name isn't on a single page. I put $30 million into that house." Damian roared, the injustice of it burning in his throat. "I know. And the prenup you signed has a clause. I'm reading it right now that any financial or material contributions to non-marital assets are to be considered irrevocable gifts with no expectation of reimbursement." Frank's voice was grim. "You paid for your own cage, Damian. Generously." Damian sank onto the edge of the unmade bed, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a cold dread. "Fine. She can have the house, a pile of bricks. What about my company?" "My actual assets." That Frank said, his voice dropping lower, is where the real demolition begins. "You remember the morality clause, the one your previous counsel flagged and you called quaint?" Damian remembered. He had laughed, picturing some dusty, Victorian-era standard of behavior. "Well," Frank continued, "it's not quaint. It's a nuclear weapon. For a publicly witnessed breach, and believe me, a video on every news channel counts as witnessed, the wronged party is entitled to a punitive settlement. It awards Reagan 50% of all assets accumulated during the marriage." He paused, letting the weight of the next words land. And her counsel, the formidable Ms. Sharma, is defining assets as the total appreciation in the market value of your Westwood Holdings stock from the date of your wedding until yesterday. The air left Damian's lungs. The company's valuation had grown by nearly $4 billion in the 5 years he'd been married. 50% of that. The number was astronomical, unthinkable. It was a mortal wound to his fortune. She can't, he stammered. "She doesn't know the first thing about finance." "She doesn't have to," Frank countered tiredly. "She has Walter Davies, and he, my friend, knows everything." While Damian was absorbing the scale of his financial ruin, Reagan was sitting in the sun-drenched morning room of the Greenwich estate. The house was quiet, the frantic energy of the previous night having given way to a profound calm. A cup of herbal tea steamed on the table beside her. Her hand rested on her belly, a protective, constant gesture. She wasn't celebrating. There was no triumphant joy, only the solemn weight of a necessary amputation. Her grandfather, Walter, sat across from her, his aged hands wrapped around his own cup. He had arrived at dawn. "Anya has made the preliminary call to the board's chairman," he said, his voice gentle. "They're in a state of panic. The stock is in freefall. They need a solution, and they need one now. Reagan looked out the window at the gardens. She had so carefully helped design the gardens Damian had always referred to as his. I don't want the company, Grandpa. I never did. I don't want his name. I don't want his world. I just want him gone. I want to build a safe, quiet life for this baby. I know, Kate Walter said, his eyes full of a deep, fierce pride. And that is precisely what we will secure for you. This isn't about revenge. It is about consequences. It's about ensuring the wolf you've ejected from the house can't circle back and tear it down. Anya Sharma joined them via a secure video call. Her face was all business. The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow. They've suspended Damian, but they're adrift. They fear a hostile takeover from your end. Then we must reassure them. Reagan said, her voice finding a new strength. Present the terms, Anya. His complete and permanent removal. In exchange, I will place my shares, my leverage, into a blind trust. Its only directive will be to ensure the company's stability. I'm not a corporate raider. I'm a mother protecting her future. It was a masterful strategy. She wasn't seizing power. She was restoring order. She was cauterizing the wound that Damian had inflicted, saving the livelihoods of thousands of employees and the investments of shareholders. She was doing what a real CEO should. The news of his termination came via a cold, 2-sentence email the following afternoon. He was no longer CEO, president, or chairman of Westwood Holdings. A buyout of his remaining shares was being processed. He was out, cast out from the empire he had built with his own 2 hands. The subsequent weeks were a descent into a grey, featureless hell. His life, once a whirlwind of high-stakes meetings and glamorous events, shrank to the 4 walls of the hotel suite. The calls from his board stopped, replaced by calls from Roxanne's lawyer, negotiating the price of her silence. He wired the money without a second thought, a pathetic severance package for a relationship that had cost him everything. Roxanne Croft vanished from the face of the earth, her social media wiped clean, a ghost in a blood-red dress. He read that Gideon Pierce had successfully poached 2 of his top project managers. The wolves were circling the wounded beast. He hit his absolute nadir one rainy Tuesday, nearly a month after the gala. The hotel room was a mess, the air thick with the smell of despair. He was unshaven, drinking a glass of whiskey that might as well have been water, and aimlessly scrolling through a financial news site. And then he saw it. It wasn't a paparazzi shot, but a photo from a local Greenwich publication. The headline read, "Reagan Davies pledges support for new prenatal care wing at Greenwich Hospital." In the photo, Reagan stood at a podium. Her pregnancy was obvious now, a beautiful central part of her. She wore a simple cream-colored dress, and her face, free of the heavy makeup she'd worn for society events, was serene. She wasn't smiling exactly, but her expression was one of profound peace and purpose. She looked strong, healthy, and completely unshakably whole. He stared at the image, the whiskey glass frozen halfway to his lips. The last vestiges of his anger, his denial, his self-pity, didn't just crumble. They evaporated. In their place was a hollow, echoing clarity that was more painful than any rage. He saw the woman in the photo, and remembered the girl he'd first met at an architectural fundraiser, brilliant, passionate, with a laugh that could light up a room. He had been drawn to that light, but over the years he had done everything in his power to dim it, to make it fit into the small ornamental box he required for a wife. He had mistaken her kindness for weakness, her quiet nature for passivity, her grace for submission. He had been given a masterpiece, and he had treated it like a cheap print, ready to be discarded for a newer, flashier model. The mansion, the company, the status he saw now that they were all props on a stage. The real treasure had been Reagan herself and the new life she was carrying, and he had shoved it all aside. He finally understood. That night, when the gates had refused to open and Mr. Henderson had turned him away, it wasn't just about a legal document. It was a metaphor for his entire life. He had never truly been the master of the castle. He was just a guest in Reagan's house, a guest in a life of quiet dignity he had never earned, and a guest in the presence of a strength he was too arrogant to ever recognize. Security hadn't just escorted him out of a mansion. They had escorted him out of a life he had never truly deserved and could now never get back. And so Damian Westwood's gilded world came crashing down, not with a prolonged war, but with the quiet, decisive click of a gate he could no longer open. His story is a stark, brutal reminder that true power isn't about the name on a skyscraper or the balance in a bank account. It's about the foundations we build our lives upon. Damian built his on arrogance and betrayal, while Reagan, in her quiet way, stood upon a foundation of legacy intelligence and a prenuptial agreement he was too proud to read. He thought he was the king, but he was merely a guest in the Queen's castle. And when the time came, she simply and irrevocably changed the locks. What do you think was Reagan's move, a brilliant act of self-preservation or cold-blooded revenge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
Poor wife walks in on Millionaire proposing to Mistress. What she does next will shock you. When Maria Delgado pushed open the ornate doors to the private dining room, she was expecting a quiet evening with her millionaire husband, Jacob. Instead, she found him kneeling before another woman, an extravagant ring poised between his trembling fingers. In that split second, her world shattered like delicate porcelain dropped from a great height. Emotions warred inside her: shock, betrayal, fury. But what Maria did next defied every expectation. The consequences of that decisive moment would reverberate through high society circles, revealing secret alliances, shattered trust, and a woman's quest to carve her own destiny out of the chaos her husband had unleashed. Maria Delgado had been raised to believe in the power of love. Born in a modest suburb of Philadelphia, she'd spent her childhood studying hard, watching her parents work long hours, and learning the value of perseverance. Love, in her eyes, was meant to be honorable, a sacred promise that transcended time and adversity. So, when she married Jacob Delgado, an unassuming man at the time, who later skyrocketed to wealth, she believed their union was fated. Everything about Jacob back then spoke of ambition tempered by warmth, a thirst for success supported by a deep devotion to her. They married in their mid-20s, beginning with a modest apartment in downtown Philadelphia. While he climbed the rungs of the real estate development world, Maria supported them both by teaching music lessons to neighborhood kids. She beamed with pride each time Jacob closed a deal that brought them a step closer to his dream, building an empire. Through the nascent years of their marriage, every victory was shared. Every setback was consoled by the other. The couple felt invincible. As Jacob's fortunes grew, so did his interests, and the city seemed too small for his evolving ambitions. With the promise of even greater success, he uprooted them to New York. Over time, he transformed from the modest man Maria once knew into someone revered by the upper echelons of Manhattan's elite. He became known for orchestrating multi-million-dollar real estate ventures. Their modest apartment turned into a lavish penthouse overlooking Central Park. From dressing in simple button-down shirts to adorning himself in bespoke suits from Savile Row, Jacob thrived in the glitz and glamour of high society life. Maria was proud of him, of course, But with each acquisition, each expansion, each lavish party thrown by Manhattan's wealthy set, she began to sense something intangible slipping away. The sweet, humble spark in Jacob's eyes was being replaced by a relentless desire for more. Their shared dinners became fewer and fewer. Their conversations, once intimately about dreams and daily life, revolved around boardroom strategies and the constant hum of new deals. Where there was once closeness, an unspoken chasm was opening. Still, Maria was no stranger to sacrifice. She believed that a marriage demanded effort and understanding. She accepted that his time was consumed by meetings, power lunches with foreign investors, and charity galas where he networked. She made space for his blossoming empire and refused to let suspicion take root. If he was distant, she told herself, it was because he was tired. If his phone rang at odd hours, it was because that was how the real estate world worked. She clung to the memory of that earnest young man who held her hand in their first tiny kitchen, dreaming of a brighter future together. But all illusions can shatter. Late one evening, after one of his countless events, Jacob casually mentioned that he wanted to take her to an exclusive restaurant the next night. Belafonte's, perched high above the city with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the sparkling skyline. Maria's heart fluttered. A private dinner just for them, exactly what they needed to revive their bond. She felt a spark of hope that maybe their relationship could rekindle, that the old Jacob would re-emerge, if only for a night. The following day, she dressed with care in a flowing, emerald green gown. She recalled how green was Jacob's favorite color on her, how he'd often say her eyes looked like precious jewels when she wore it. She left their penthouse with trembling excitement, not wanting to arrive too early, but also conscious that the invitation had felt momentous, like something significant was in store. When she reached the restaurant, an attentive maitre d' greeted her by name and led her down a corridor to a discreet, gold-trimmed door. Soft piano music flowed from within. Her heart pounded, imagining a candlelit room just for the two of them. Instead, as the door swung open, she stumbled upon a scene she could never have prepared for. Jacob, down on one knee, proposing to a statuesque blonde woman, his mistress, whose face Maria recognized from hushed rumors at parties and unconfirmed gossip in tabloids. The ring in Jacob's hand sparkled like a fallen star, captured by the overhead chandelier's light. Time froze, capturing her shock, the mistress's gasp, and Jacob's horrified expression in an excruciating tableau. Maria felt dizzy, her sense of reality splintering. Memories of their simple days in Philadelphia flooded her mind. Her hands shook as she clutched the handle of the door for support. She sensed the maitre d' quickly slip away, likely to avoid the pending explosion. The look on Jacob's face rapidly morphed from romantic fervor to utter panic. How long has this been going on? Maria finally managed to choke out, voice trembling. The blonde woman, Annalise Winslow, as Maria would later learn, stepped back, her hand protectively covering the ring that Jacob had tried to slip on her finger. She had a deer-in-headlights look, as if she had expected this moment, but not in such a brutal collision of truths. "Maria," Jacob began, rising slowly from his knee, "it's not what it looks like." A pit of molten anger rose in Maria's chest. The anguish burned, pried open by betrayal. She glanced at the ring Jacob was holding. It wasn't a tiny diamond. It was a massive rock, overshadowing the modest ring she herself had worn with pride for years. Everything about this was a sickening confirmation of what she had refused to suspect. She refused to let him see her crumble, her eyes brimming with unshed tears locked onto Jacob's. "For once in your life," she said, voice trembling yet steel-edged, "tell me the truth." Jacob glanced between Maria and Annalise. Shame flickered across his expression, but only for a moment before resolve set in. In a voice that cracked, he said, I was going to explain it after this. I never wanted you to find out this way. He was trying to speak gently, but Maria found it galling. Here, in a lavish, private dining room that cost more per meal than some people earned in a month, her husband was kneeling before another woman with an engagement ring. Her world felt false, illusions shattered like shards of broken glass. But instead of running, instead of screaming or hurling every insult she could muster, Maria inhaled. She decided then and there that she wouldn't collapse. Not now, not ever. With a composure that surprised even herself, she said, "Fine." She tugged off her wedding band, the simple gold band that had once symbolized their hopeful union. She placed it gently on the nearest table, right next to a silver platter meant for some extravagant dinner. She looked at Annalise, whose cheeks had gone pale. "Congratulations," Maria said icily. "You've caught a big fish. I hope you both choke on it." She turned on her heel, ignoring Jacob's pleas for her to wait. She walked out with her head held high, tears threatening to fall, but refusing to let them out until she was out of that stifling, perfumed environment. Little did either of them know, Maria's next actions would set off a chain reaction of hidden truths, corporate betrayals, and unexpected alliances that would ultimately turn the power dynamics of their world on its head. Maria spent the night at a friend's townhouse near Gramercy Park. This friend, Jennifer Robertson, was one of the few people Maria trusted implicitly. Jennifer, a lawyer by profession, had seen far too many wealthy husbands try to con their wives out of rightful settlements. In the warmly lit living room, Maria recounted the horrifying scene. Jennifer listened quietly, her arms folded, eyes flashing indignation at Jacob's betrayal. When Maria finally finished, the tears she had held back since the restaurant began to slide down her cheeks. Jennifer promptly pulled her into a hug. "Maria," she murmured, "this is terrible, but you're not going through it alone. This time, you have to look out for yourself." Maria sniffled, still reeling. "I never thought. All those business trips, all those late nights." Jennifer tightened her grip. "People like Jacob, they think they can have everything. The wife, the mistress, the image of perfection. You don't deserve that." Maria wiped her tears. A cold anger took root in her heart, overshadowing her sorrow. She had sacrificed too much, believed in Jacob too long. Perhaps she'd been naive, but there was no time left for self-pity. "What do I do?" she asked, gazing at Jennifer. "I'm not going to just let him throw me away." Jennifer pursed her lips, then reached for her phone. "First, we need to call Patrick Hodges, one of the top divorce attorneys in New York. He'll know exactly what to do. The Delgado empire might have been built by Jacob, but you've stood beside him every step of the way. New York law won't ignore that." For hours into the night, they planned. Jennifer explained the complexities of high-asset divorces, the myriad ways spouses try to hide money. They dissected the financial empire Jacob had built, the real estate ventures, the offshore accounts rumored by some to exist, the charity foundations that he might use as tax shelters. Maria listened, took notes, and found her heartbreak morphing into a dogged determination. If Jacob thought he could so brazenly propose to another woman, he was in for a rude awakening. The next morning, Maria woke from a fitful sleep. She rose, showered, and dressed in a simple black outfit. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, her eyes rimmed with sadness, yet also lit by an undercurrent of resolve. She thought about that shocking moment in the restaurant. It had been mere hours since her life was turned inside out, yet it felt like an eternity. An unexpected wave of curiosity washed over her. What kind of woman was Annalise Winslow, beyond the honey-blonde hair and designer gown? How long had Annalise waited in the wings for Jacob to propose? Maria's mind churned with possibilities. Was she manipulated by Jacob's power, or was she the manipulator? Determined to cut through the speculation, Maria decided she wanted facts. She dialed a private investigator's number, someone recommended by Jennifer. a man named Richard Pine, known in certain circles for his thorough, discreet approach. Maria remembered meeting him briefly at a philanthropic event. He'd been introduced to her as the best man to find what's hidden. If there was dirt to be dug up, Richard Pine could unearth it. Within an hour, Maria was sitting in a small, upscale coffee shop near Union Square. Face to face with Richard, he was a sturdy man in his mid-50s, with kind but calculating eyes. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Delgado?" he asked in a measured tone, sipping his espresso. Maria inhaled slowly. "I found my husband proposing to another woman last night," she said, voice unwavering. "I need to know everything about her background, her motivations, any skeletons in her closet." Richard set down his cup, making the slightest grimace. "I'm sorry to hear that. Cheating spouses are unfortunately too common in my line of work. But let's talk specifics. What do you already know about this woman?" "Her name is Annalise Winslow. I believe she's from Los Angeles originally. She's in her mid-20s, definitely younger than me or Jacob. Rumor has it she used to be a model, or maybe a socialite. I'm not entirely sure." Richard nodded, scribbling notes. "Understood. I'll compile everything I can find. Miss Winslow's finances, connections, travel history, job history, whatever might help. And I assume you also want me to keep an eye on Jacob's dealings?" He lifted an eyebrow knowingly. "Yes," Maria replied firmly. "I have a strong feeling there's more to this than just an affair. I want to know if he's been hiding money or if he's planning to move assets out of the country. Anything that can help me get some measure of justice when we go to court, or even before that." Richard nodded again. "I'll be in touch soon." Maria thanked him and left, feeling that with each step she was moving deeper into a labyrinth where she had to be the one calling the shots. She wasn't merely a scorned wife, she was becoming an orchestrator of her own destiny. By afternoon, Maria knew she could no longer avoid returning to the penthouse. She needed her clothes, her documents, her life. She braced herself for the confrontation that was inevitable. Summoning what courage she had, she took a taxi to the towering building that had once felt like a dream come true. Its gleaming marble lobby now felt foreign. She ascended in the private elevator, her heart pounding, stomach in knots. As she slid the keycard and the doors to the penthouse opened, she heard Jacob's voice carrying down the corridor. To her surprise, he wasn't alone. She recognized the female voice, Annalise. They seemed to be arguing. Maria took a moment to listen. Through the grand foyer, she could make out the two silhouettes in the living area. She heard Annalise's voice, tight with anger. "You said you'd handle this differently. Now everyone's talking about it like some scandal. How do you think this makes me look?" Jacob hissed back. "You think I planned for Maria to walk in? God, Annalise, I'm juggling a million things. The board at Delgado Holdings is going to be furious if this leaks to the press. This was supposed to be discreet." Maria felt a twinge of savage satisfaction hearing the cracks form in their alliance. With her shoulders set, she stepped forward, letting her heels clack on the polished floor. Jacob and Annalise whirled around, identical expressions of shock distorting their features. "Maria," Jacob started, lifting a hand in an entreaty, but Maria's gaze was locked onto Annalise. Up close, the mistress was undeniably striking tall, poised with carefully styled waves of golden hair. Yet Maria noticed a flicker of insecurity behind that controlled exterior. "Good," she thought. "I'm not the only one rattled. I just came to get my things," Maria said plainly. "Then I'll leave, and you two can celebrate your engagement in peace." Annalise's shoulders relaxed, but her eyes narrowed in faint challenge. Jacob stepped forward. "Maria, wait. I think we should talk." She laughed mirthlessly. "Talk? That's what you wanted to do?" "You were going to propose to her, Jacob. Don't pretend there's any middle ground here." And honestly, what do I have to say to you? Congratulations. Jacob's jaw tightened. It's not that simple. Actually, it is, Maria snapped, her emotions flaring. You made a choice, a public choice no less. I can't undo that, and I won't be your doormat. Annalise crossed her arms, lips pressed together, as though restraining herself from retorting. Maria caught the fleeting glance she gave Jacob, some mixture of fear and entitlement. It dawned on Maria that Annalise may have feared losing the security Jacob's fortune promised. The scorned wife's presence in the penthouse complicated matters for the mistress, who presumably dreamed of living here in style. Just take whatever you need, Jacob said after a moment. We don't need to fight in front of her. Maria's chest constricted, memories of 1,000 shared moments in this home swirling in her mind. But she suppressed the pain and moved calmly to the master bedroom, which was filled with expensive furnishings and the faint scent of the cologne Jacob once gifted her. She methodically packed a suitcase with her clothes and personal items. Her fingertips lingered on a framed photo of them in front of their first store-bought Christmas tree, back in their humble Philadelphia apartment. She set it aside, not wanting to carry something so laden with nostalgia. As she re-entered the living area, she caught a glimpse of Annalise's engagement ring glinting in the afternoon light. Rage flared again, but she forced composure, reminding herself that she had a plan. Once she had everything she needed, she paused at the door, turning back to them. Jacob, she said, I've asked Patrick Hodges to represent me. If you want to avoid a scorched earth divorce, I suggest you speak to your attorney. Annalise's eyes flared at the mention of divorce. Possibly it hammered home the reality that Maria wasn't just going to vanish quietly. Jacob's face fell. He tried to speak, but words failed him. In that charged silence, Maria left. She felt hollow, but also strangely empowered. The woman who had walked in on her husband's betrayal mere hours ago was no longer the same, and what awaited her next was a labyrinth of hidden truths. Over the next week, Manhattan buzzed with rumors. The Delgado name had become a fixture of high society galas and philanthropic events. Whispers circulated through penthouse brunches, exclusive clubs, and midnight parties. Jacob Delgado had not only cheated on Maria, but had proposed to his mistress. The gossip columns ate it up. Real estate mogul's secret engagement was the headline in at least one online publication. People debated whether Maria was blindsided or complicit, whether she'd stay or go, and what the mistress was like. In the meantime, Patrick Hodges, the formidable divorce attorney, laid out a roadmap for Maria. They met in his sleek midtown office, with Jennifer present as moral support. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the hustle and bustle of Manhattan below, as though showing a world that never slept, never paused for heartbreak. Maria, Patrick said in a calm, almost fatherly tone, Jacob's net worth is estimated at around $700 million. We need to act fast to ensure he doesn't move assets out of reach. 700 million, Maria echoed, stunned, though she knew the figure hovered in that range. She had watched his success balloon over the years, but to hear it stated so plainly shook her. She'd never placed a dollar value on their relationship. Patrick continued, We'll file motions to freeze a significant portion of his assets until the court rules on equitable distribution. But be ready, his legal team will fight. Also, the prenuptial agreement. We need to see if that holds up in court. Maria's brow furrowed. We had a prenup, but it was signed before his empire expanded like this. Back then, he had almost nothing. I never thought it would come to this. Patrick flipped through documents. Yes, it's from 15 years ago, but we have grounds to challenge it if certain conditions have changed significantly, or if you can prove undue influence or anything along those lines. After all, you supported him morally and even financially in the early years. Jennifer chimed in, Don't forget about the potential hidden offshore accounts. Rumors are swirling that he might be moving investments to the Cayman Islands. Maria felt her insides twist. Every layer of betrayal deepened her resolve. Let's do whatever it takes. I don't want to be cruel. I just want what's fair. But if Jacob tries to shortchange me after all I've done to help him, then I'm ready to fight. Patrick gave a firm nod. I'll coordinate with your investigator, Richard Pine. We'll uncover any hidden income streams or suspicious accounts. In the meantime, you need to remain calm. These next few weeks will be a roller coaster. Maria exhaled. She glanced at Jennifer, who squeezed her hand. This was war, and she was prepared. Late one night, Maria's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She tapped it open and saw, "I have information about Annalise. Meet me at Calderwood Cafe, 9 am tomorrow. R.P. Richard Pine." She felt a rush of anticipation. The next morning she arrived at the cozy Calderwood Cafe, known for its artisanal pastries and discreet atmosphere. Richard sat at a corner table, leafing through a manila folder. Maria slid into the chair opposite him. "So, what have you found?" Richard leaned forward, voice low. "Quite a bit, actually. Annalise Winslow is from Los Angeles. That much is true. She started off as a pageant contestant in her teens, then moved into small-time modeling gigs, mostly promotional events. After that, she tried to break into Hollywood. She had a few minor roles, nothing significant. Maria listened intently as Richard continued. She married briefly at 19 to a man named Parker Bloom, an older talent manager. The marriage lasted less than a year, and she walked away with a sizable alimony settlement, allegations of emotional abuse from both sides, but nothing proven. After that, she moved to New York around 3 years ago. She's been living in high-end apartments, though it's unclear how she's been affording them. "So she's a gold digger," Maria muttered, disgust curling in her stomach. Richard shrugged. "She's adept at finding wealthy men, that much is clear. And from phone records I accessed, it seems she was seeing Jacob for at least a year before you caught them." Maria's chest clenched. A year. She felt her hands tremble momentarily. For a year, her husband had been living a double life. "Go on," she prompted, forcing composure. "Her finances are shaky. She maintains appearances, but she's leveraged with credit card debt, living off gifts from older boyfriends. I also found something else, some suspicion that she was previously connected to a money laundering scheme, though nothing concrete enough for an arrest. She's cunning. She knows how to navigate the wealthy circles and keep her secrets hidden." Maria's mind spun. She pictured Annalise draped on Jacob's arm, whispering sweet words to him while systematically securing her future with his money. This was no mere fling. This was a calculated move by an opportunist. It didn't absolve Jacob, he was equally to blame, a grown man who should have seen the red flags. But it changed how Maria viewed the dynamic. "How can I use this information?" she asked. Richard folded his hands. "Your legal team can introduce this as evidence that Annalise might be pushing Jacob to move assets, or that she might have a questionable background that affects the case. While it doesn't directly influence your divorce settlement, it can shed light on Jacob's credibility and motives." Maria nodded slowly. "Thank you, Richard. This is incredibly helpful." She closed the folder, feeling her spirits lift for a moment. This was more than just heartbreak. Now it was a mission to protect herself from two cunning players. She had let love blind her to Jacob's changes, but she would not let it blind her to her own future. While the divorce proceedings were set in motion, Jacob Delgado faced a crisis of his own. The Delgado Holdings Board of Directors had caught wind of the scandal. The reason? A major investor, KG Nakamura, who had planned to pour hundreds of millions into Delgado Holdings' new project, was now hesitant. The fiasco with Jacob's personal life signaled instability at the helm, and big money despises instability. A week later, in the elegant conference room at Delgado Holdings headquarters, Jacob was grilled by the board. The walls were lined with modern art, and the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. But the tension inside was palpable. Men and women in suits, representing some of the largest financial institutions, demanded answers. Board member Regina Charles, a tough-as-nails executive with silver-streaked hair, eyed Jacob coldly. "We're not here to judge your personal decisions," she began, "but your behavior is affecting our business." Mr. Nakamura is spooked. He stalled negotiations because he doesn't like the negative press associated with your, shall we say, public affair. Jacob attempted a confident posture. "We can handle this," he said. "Nakamura's concerns are about the stability of the company. I can assure you Delgado Holdings is stronger than ever." Regina's sharp gaze didn't waver. "Your wife, Maria Delgado, has been a visible figure at charitable events linked to this company. She was involved, albeit unofficially, in several philanthropic partnerships. Her departure in such a scandalous way raises questions. We need to ensure no crisis of confidence escalates." Jacob felt his insides tighten. The narrative was twisting. Maria was no longer just his wife. She was an extension of the brand he had built. He stifled the desire to lash out at the board's insinuation that his personal life was fair game. "Instead," he insisted, "I'm working on controlling the narrative. We'll handle the press. And as for Maria, once the divorce is settled, we can present a unified, amicable front." Regina's lips formed a thin line. "Jacob, we hired a PR team. They've strongly advised that we do damage control before the next shareholders' meeting. That might involve statements from both you and Maria, something to quell rumors of a messy divorce that could sabotage investor confidence. Besides, have you considered the ramifications if Miss Delgado takes you to the cleaners financially?" Jacob's frustration peaked. "I have attorneys for that," he snapped. "We'll handle it." The rest of the board members exchanged looks. One of them, Arnold Powell, tried to lighten the tone. "Look, we just need reassurance that Delgado Holdings won't implode from a personal scandal. If you can't get it under control, we might have to explore leadership changes." That was the ultimate threat, a coup at his own company. Jacob forced a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "There will be no need for that. Trust me." As the meeting adjourned, Jacob was left alone for a moment. His reflection in the glossy surface of the boardroom table looked older, more stressed. He thought of Maria's eyes the last time he saw her, brimming with betrayal. Then he thought of Annalise, upset with the negative attention. For the first time, he questioned if the precarious web he'd spun was worth the cost. But it was too late. The avalanche had already begun. In a twist that neither Maria nor Jacob could have predicted, help came from an unexpected quarter, Jacob's estranged sister, Daniela Delgado. She had parted ways with the family years earlier, after disagreeing with Jacob on a major business decision that led to a bitter falling out. Since then, Daniela had built her own path, creating a successful interior design firm. She'd always admired Maria's kindness from afar and held contempt for Jacob's ruthless ambition. Out of the blue, Daniela reached out to Maria. She called one evening while Maria was reviewing documents with Jennifer. "Maria, this is Daniela, Jacob's sister." Maria's initial shock shifted into curiosity. "Yes, Daniela. The first remember you. We haven't spoken in ages." "Look," Daniela said, "I heard about what happened. I don't blame you if you don't want to talk. But I have information about a couple of major real estate deals. Jacob's been working on things that might be relevant to your divorce. If you're interested, meet me at the Silverwood Lounge tomorrow night at 8. Maria hesitated. Jacob had mentioned Daniela only rarely, and it was always laced with bitterness. Yet something told her Daniela might be sincere. "I'll be there," she said, surprising even herself. The next night, Maria walked into the Silverwood Lounge, a chic bar with velvet drapes and soft jazz music. Daniela, a petite woman with sharp features, waved from a corner booth. She wore a stylish black suit and maintained a guarded expression. "Thank you for meeting me," Daniela said, offering a polite nod as Maria sat down. Maria studied Jacob's sister. "I'm surprised you reached out. Jacob never said good things about you." Daniela smirked. "Likewise. He painted you as the obedient wife who turned a blind eye to his shadier deals. But I knew that wasn't you. We might not have been close, but I always saw your kindness." Now, about his real estate dealings. She opened her handbag and pulled out a USB drive. These are documents that point to a series of shell companies linked to Delgado Holdings. "I suspect he's been funneling money offshore. Years back, he tried to get me to help launder funds through interior design contracts. I refused, and that's partly why we fell out. He threatened me to keep quiet." Maria's eyes widened. She carefully took the USB drive. If these documents were legitimate, they could be a game changer. "Why help me now?" Daniela's eyes flickered with something akin to regret. "Because Jacob's arrogance has gone too far. He's forgotten family loyalty and moral boundaries. If he wants to destroy you, the one decent aspect of his life, I won't stand for it. And, to be transparent, I want him to face consequences for all the times he's bullied and blackmailed anyone who stood in his way." Maria tucked the USB drive into her purse. She studied Daniela carefully, trying to gauge sincerity. "Thank you," she said eventually. "I'll have my lawyer look at this. I appreciate your honesty." Daniela gave a single nod. "Just be careful. He'll retaliate if he feels cornered. Jacob Delgado is still my brother, and I know what he's capable of." Fear nudged at Maria's heart, but it was overshadowed by her determination. She swore to herself that she wouldn't let fear rule her anymore. Jacob had shattered her trust and flaunted his betrayal in a way that threatened her entire future. She wouldn't stand idly by. While Maria gathered information, Annalise Winslow was not idle. She realized Jacob was in a precarious position. The negative press, the board's dissatisfaction, and now the looming divorce threatened to erode the luxurious future she had counted on. In whispered phone calls, she pressed Jacob to finalize their engagement, to secure her name in the Delgado fortune before it slipped away. Yet Jacob delayed, promising to fix everything first. Uncertain of Jacob's ability to protect her interests, Annalise took matters into her own hands. She arranged a private lunch with one of Jacob's longtime associates, a banker named Charles Montclair. He was known to handle offshore transactions for Delgado Holdings. At a chic bistro on the Upper East Side, she met Charles in a secluded corner. "Jacob trusts you, right?" she asked, swirling her wine glass. She wore a designer dress, exuding confidence, even though her heart pounded with nerves. Charles nodded slowly. "We've done business together for years." Annalise leaned forward, letting her voice drop to a conspiratorial whisper. "Good, because I want to guarantee that if things go south, I'm protected." Charles raised an eyebrow. "That's a tall order." Jacob keeps his financial dealings close to the vest. A sly smile tugged at Annalise's lips. "I'm sure he does. But I also know Delgado Holdings is possibly moving money in ways that aren't entirely above board. If you help me get a piece of the pie quietly, I'll make it worth your while. I have connections in L.A. that might interest you." Charles swallowed. He was no stranger to morally dubious requests, but this was bolder than most. Still, money talked. "What do you propose?" "I propose you set me up with an offshore account. A small percentage of whatever Jacob moves. I don't care if it's 1 million or 10 million, as long as I have something to fall back on. In return, I'll keep my mouth shut if the authorities come knocking." Charles looked uneasy. He glanced around to ensure no one was listening. This could be risky. But I'll see what I can do. Annalise nodded, leaning back with a smug satisfaction. She felt a thrill at the prospect of securing her own fortune. She was tired of waiting for Jacob to deliver. If he was going to let his empire crumble, she'd salvage what she could. The divorce proceedings accelerated. Under the scrutiny of Patrick Hodges, Jacob's lawyers tried every trick in the book. They argued that the prenuptial agreement limited Maria's entitlement to a fraction of the current fortune. But Patrick introduced evidence that Maria's early support had directly facilitated Jacob's meteoric rise. Financial experts testified about intangible contributions, spousal support, and the validity of a prenup signed under potentially misleading circumstances. Behind closed doors, settlement negotiations were intense. One afternoon, in a wood-paneled conference room in the courthouse, Maria and Jacob faced each other while their lawyers sparred over details. The tension was suffocating. Jacob's lead attorney, Garrett Rhodes, glared over his wire rim glasses. My client is offering a significant settlement, $20 million. That's more than generous, given the prenuptial agreement. Maria's lawyer, Patrick, shot back. $20 million is a pittance compared to the Delgado empire. My client deserves equitable distribution, especially in light of the new evidence we'll be presenting about hidden assets. Garrett stiffened. What evidence? Patrick laid out the file containing Daniela's USB drive findings, shell companies, suspicious transfers, and potential tax evasion. Maria noticed Jacob's face flush with anger. She held his gaze, refusing to back down. "If you don't want the courts delving into these matters," Patrick said calmly, "it would be wise to offer a fair settlement and quickly." Garrett looked to Jacob, who cleared his throat. "This is ridiculous," Jacob muttered. "Maria, we can handle this privately. Let's not blow up everything we built." Maria's anger flared. "We didn't build anything together anymore, Jacob. You destroyed that. I just want what I'm legally entitled to. Nothing less." Before Jacob could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, features hardening. "Excuse me," he said, rising and stepping outside. Maria exchanged a look with her lawyer, who gave her a reassuring nod. She felt a pang in her chest, remembering the man she once loved. But she'd come too far to yield. Moments later, Jacob returned, face grim. "There's a situation at Delgado Holdings. I need to attend to it. We'll resume this later." He left with Garrett, leaving an uncomfortable silence behind. Patrick exhaled and turned to Maria. "He's rattled. That's good. But we need to keep the pressure on." She nodded, her mind swirling with possibilities. Jacob had always thrived under pressure, but this was a new realm of stress, public scandal, bored dissatisfaction, a vengeful sister revealing his secrets, a cunning mistress, and a betrayed wife fighting back. If anyone understood the empire's vulnerability, it was Maria, and now she had no reason to protect it. Jacob discovered what the phone call was about. Keiji Nakamura had officially withdrawn his large investment due to the ongoing negative publicity and internal instability at Delgado Holdings. The blow was catastrophic. Stocks dipped, the board was livid, rumors of a hostile takeover circulated. Jacob's once iron grip on his empire was loosening. In the days that followed, tabloids feasted on fresh gossip. Leaked whispers suggested that Jacob's mistress was demanding a rush wedding and that the Delgado board was considering a forced resignation if the crisis continued. Jacob's face, once glowing with ambition, now appeared haggard. The carefully curated facade of success was crumbling faster than he could salvage it. At Annalise's insistence, Jacob tried to offer her a lavish ceremony in some exotic locale, hoping a quick marriage might quell some rumors and secure her unwavering support. But the board frowned at any attempt that would further sensationalize his personal life. An internal power struggle erupted, with some directors pressuring Jacob to step down temporarily. Regina Charles especially had sharpened her stance, aligning with a faction that believed Delgado Holdings needed a new figurehead to reassure investors. In a desperate bid to maintain control, Jacob made a public statement. Cameras flashed as he stepped before a cluster of reporters outside the Delgado Holdings headquarters. He wore a dark suit, face set in an expression of forced calm. "I would like to address recent speculations regarding my personal life," he began, voice subdued. "I am currently going through a divorce process, and I request privacy and respect during this challenging time. Delgado Holdings remains strong, and we are fully committed to our ongoing projects. The unfortunate withdrawal of Mr. Nakamura's investment does not diminish our stability." He continued with corporate platitudes, but the reporters clamored for more personal answers. "What about the mistress? Are you engaged already?" one asked. Jacob ignored it, reading from his carefully prepared statement. But the damage was done. In the public's eye, he was the faithless millionaire with something to hide. Watching the coverage from Jennifer's townhouse, Maria felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. She had loved that man once. Now he was a stranger, fighting to keep illusions intact. But illusions always come at a price. She reminded herself of that truth. As the divorce hearing approached, tension reached a fever pitch. Patrick Hodges received a call from Garrett Rhodes, requesting a private meeting, just the lawyers and their clients, with no media or court officials. Maria and Jennifer drove to the law firm's office, hearts pounding. They were ushered into a sleek conference room. Jacob, Garrett, Patrick, and a stone-faced Annalise were already seated around a polished table. Maria ignored the pang of seeing Annalise by Jacob's side. She focused on the fact that the mistress's presence was highly unusual in a divorce negotiation. Garrett cleared his throat. "We've come with a proposition. Mr. Delgado is prepared to offer a settlement of $100 million plus the Manhattan penthouse in exchange for Miss Delgado signing a non-disclosure agreement, no further revelations about Delgado Holdings or Mr. Delgado's personal affairs. We want to handle this quietly and move on." Maria's eyes flickered. 100 million was vastly larger than the initial offer. She glanced at Patrick, who gave a subtle nod, indicating it was a substantial proposition. Yet something felt off. Her gaze slid to Annalise, who looked uncharacteristically tense. Patrick spoke up. "It's a generous offer, but we need to verify if there are no further conditions. Also, the NDA's scope must be clarified. Miss Delgado has the right to discuss her personal experiences freely." Jacob cut in, voice sharp. "I don't want my ex-wife airing dirty laundry. We sign this. We end it. Maria, you go your way, I go mine." Maria's heart raced. 100 million could secure her future, free her from the stress, and let her start anew. It was a fortune beyond her wildest imagination back when they were newlyweds sharing cheap takeout. But then her gaze settled on Annalise, who avoided eye contact. Maria recalled the shady deals and the knowledge that Delgado Holdings was unraveling behind the scenes. She realized that if she accepted the offer blindly, she might be stepping into a trap, allowing Jacob to cover up potential crimes and injustice. She licked her lips, choosing her words carefully. "Jacob, I appreciate the offer, but I won't sign anything until I'm sure you're not hiding more. I don't need your hush money if it means letting you and Annalise ruin more lives." Anger flashed in Jacob's eyes. "You're letting bitterness cloud your judgment. Think of what 100 million can do for you." Annalise finally spoke, voice hesitant. "Maria, please. There's no need to drag this out. We can all walk away with dignity." Maria almost laughed at the irony of Annalise talking about dignity. Instead, she closed her eyes, remembering the heartbreak of that night at Belafonte's. Then she thought of the fear and manipulation that might still lurk if she let Jacob walk away scot-free. "I'll consider it," she said, "but I'm not making a decision today." Garrett, Jacob's lawyer, looked frustrated. "We need an answer soon. Otherwise, we proceed to court." "Then we proceed to court," Patrick replied calmly. "We'll see you there." The tension was palpable as they stood to leave. Jacob locked eyes with Maria. "Don't do this," he said softly, an echo of the old Jacob appearing for a split second. "We can solve this quietly." She met his gaze, seeing the man she once loved drowned out by layers of betrayal. "If you had wanted things quiet, you wouldn't have proposed to your mistress in a public place." The day of the official court hearing dawned cloudy and brisk. Photographers and reporters crowded the courthouse steps. Maria arrived with Patrick, Jennifer, and a small security detail. Whispers followed her. She was no longer just a betrayed wife, she was the woman who might topple a millionaire's empire. Rumors swirled that she possessed damning evidence of fraud. Jacob and Annalise arrived separately, escorted by their own legal team. People craned their necks to catch a glimpse, cameras clicking furiously. He looked tense, shoulders stiff under his tailored suit. Annalise kept her chin high, though she lingered behind Jacob, as if wary of the scrutiny. Inside the large, wood-panelled courtroom, the judge, a stern woman named Honorable Denise Faraday, called the session to order. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. On the surface, it was a high-profile divorce, but in reality, it was a battleground for corporate secrets, personal vengeance, and heartbreak. Patrick presented Maria's case with meticulous detail, her contributions to Jacob's early success, the suspicious financial maneuvers uncovered by Daniela and Richard Pine, and the emotional distress caused by Jacob's public betrayal. Garrett rebutted by citing the prenup, painting Maria as vengeful, seeking more than she deserved. Midway through the proceedings, Patrick introduced a surprise witness, Daniela Delgado. She stepped forward, looking poised and determined. Her testimony about Jacob's shell companies, backed by email chains and financial documents, sent waves of shock through the courtroom. The tension climbed higher when she revealed that she had confronted Jacob years ago about money laundering allegations, which he had vehemently denied. When cross-examined by Garrett, Daniela stayed firm. "I have no reason to lie," she said quietly, "other than to expose wrongdoing. My brother has threatened me, but I won't be silent anymore." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jacob's face was a mask of barely contained fury. For Maria, hearing Daniela stand up for the truth was both validating and heartbreaking. This was the family she once thought she had. Then it was Annalise's turn on the stand. She was visibly nervous, glancing repeatedly at Jacob for reassurance. Under Patrick's probing questions, she admitted to the affair, to Jacob's promises of marriage, but denied any knowledge of financial misconduct. She played the part of the innocent lover, insisting she merely fell in love with a man who claimed he was divorcing his wife. Patrick pressed. "Did Mr. Delgado ever mention, even indirectly, wanting to shift funds out of the country, presumably to protect them from the plaintiff?" Annalise hesitated, swallowing hard. "Not in so many words," she finally said. He mentioned wanting to make sure his money was secure." That small admission sent a ripple through the courtroom. Jacob's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. By the time Annalise stepped down, sweat dotted her brow. She cast a fleeting glance at Jacob, who looked away. After a tense lunch recess, the court reconvened. Garrett strode to the center, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. "Your Honor, we have newly obtained evidence regarding Miss Delgado's own financial history. Specifically, questionable transactions in her name that raise concerns about her credibility." A hush descended. Maria's heart skipped. She had no idea what they were referring to. She quickly glanced at Patrick, who looked equally puzzled. Jennifer furrowed her brow. Could Jacob's legal team have found something contrived to discredit Maria. Garrett projected documents onto a screen. They showed wire transfers from an account titled M. Delgado to a bank in the Cayman Islands. The amounts were substantial, several $1,000,000. Maria was dumbfounded. She had never seen those transactions. "This is absurd," Patrick hissed. "Miss Delgado has no knowledge of these accounts. They must be fabricated," but Garrett pressed on. "Nevertheless, these documents indicate that Miss Delgado might have known about offshore practices and even participated in them. We must question her integrity and motivations." Maria's stomach churned. She realized this was a smear tactic, orchestrated to paint her as complicit or hypocritical. But how had they manufactured these records? The judge frowned, calling for order. "Miss Delgado," she addressed Maria, "do you have any knowledge of these transactions?" Maria stood, voice trembling but resolute. "None whatsoever, Your Honor. This is the first I've seen of these so-called documents. I suspect they're part of a scheme by Mr. Delgado to undermine my case." Jacob's eyes flicked toward her. Was there a flicker of regret, or just determination to win at any cost? The judge instructed further examination of the evidence, and recess was called for the day. The media outside went wild, speculating on whether Maria was truly innocent or had skeletons in her closet. That evening, as Maria regrouped with her team, she tried to steady her nerves. Jennifer cursed Jacob's low blow. Patrick immediately launched an investigation into the suspicious documents, suspecting they were forged or manipulated. Meanwhile, Maria's phone buzzed with a text from Richard Pine. "Meet me at my office tomorrow at 7 a.m. I might have found something that can flip this around." Tension thrummed within her. She realized that she was dancing on the edge of a high-stakes game, one where illusions could be crafted and destroyed in an instant. She also sensed that if she didn't play her cards right, she could lose everything. The next morning, Maria arrived at Richard Pine's unremarkable office building in Chelsea. In a modest but tidy workspace, he greeted her with a firm handshake. On his desk, he had a laptop open to a complicated spreadsheet of IP addresses and account details. "I suspected those documents introduced in court were forged," he began without preamble. "So I did a deep dive into the digital metadata of the wire transfers. Every time a wire transfer is done, there's an electronic fingerprint. Long story short, the documents we saw in court have anomalies that suggest they were fabricated." Maria felt a surge of relief but also anger at Jacob's treachery. "So it's definitely fake," Richard nodded. "Yes, and I have proof. The IP addresses associated with these transactions trace back to a shell company that's linked to Delgado Holdings. The digital watermark indicates the documents were created using a specific software license registered to that same shell company. In simpler terms, it was an inside job." Maria exhaled, tension draining from her shoulders. She wanted to hug Richard, but she settled for gripping his arm. "This is exactly what we need. With this, we can prove they tried to frame me." Richard offered a faint smile. "Be careful. Jacob's cornered, and cornered people can be unpredictable. But yes, this should be enough to dismantle their smear campaign." Armed with this new evidence, Maria returned to the courthouse. Patrick introduced Richard Pine's findings, systematically debunking the false documents. The judge was furious at the apparent attempt to mislead the court. Garrett stammered that they'd obtained the documents from an anonymous source and had no knowledge of the forgery. Jacob looked livid, glancing at Annalise, who stared at the floor. The judge sternly reminded all parties that perjury and tampering with evidence carried severe consequences. In a decisive moment, she ordered a full forensic audit of Delgado Holdings accounts. That spelled disaster for Jacob, who had spent years carefully disguising questionable dealings. It was the final straw that cracked his empire's shell wide open. When the courtroom resumed, Maria's legal team presented ironclad evidence that the so-called Cayman Islands bank statements in her name were forged. Metadata traced them back to a shell company tied to Delgado Holdings, proving Jacob's team had fabricated documents to discredit her. Furious at the deception, the judge ordered a comprehensive forensic audit of all Delgado Holdings accounts. Within days, the company's stock nosedived as investors panicked and board members blamed Jacob for the ensuing scandal. Facing mounting pressure, they forced him to step down as CEO, leaving him humiliated and struggling to salvage his reputation. Simultaneously, Maria's divorce proceedings reached a turning point. Recognizing he was cornered by the damning audit and under threat of a potential criminal investigation, Jacob instructed his lawyer to extend a vastly improved settlement offer. Instead of the nominal amounts initially proposed, Maria now stood to receive $200 million, a portfolio of properties including the Manhattan penthouse, and an official acknowledgement of Jacob's wrongdoing. Crucially, the settlement would also include his public apology for using forged evidence against her. Desperate to minimize further legal liabilities and public shame, Jacob surrendered to every condition, though he seethed at the outcome. On the day the final documents were signed, Jacob approached Maria in the courthouse hallway, offering a halting apology that acknowledged his betrayal and, beneath that, his regret at how spectacularly he had destroyed their shared dreams. Maria accepted his words without malice, though the bond they'd once shared was irrevocably severed. Annalise Winslow did not appear. Rumors suggested she was already planning her exit, unwilling to remain at Jacob's side now that his empire was in shambles. With the divorce finalized, Maria stepped away from the chaos. Though she walked away with more money than she'd ever imagined, she remained grounded by the values her parents had instilled in her. Resolving to use her resources for good, she founded an organization to assist women rebuilding their lives after betrayal, separation, or financial struggles. Daniela, Jacob's sister, became a staunch supporter. Together, they furnished the charity's new office, forging a friendship born of mutual respect rather than shared loyalty to Jacob. Jacob's fall from grace served as a cautionary tale in Manhattan's elite circles, a parable of unchecked ambition leading to ruin. Free from his shadow, Maria embraced her next chapter on her own terms, moving into a modern penthouse across town, a space she chose herself. Not out of obligation, she felt a renewed sense of hope. Gazing at the skyline one late afternoon, she allowed the crisp air to fill her lungs, contemplating the journey that had challenged her faith in love and trust. Yet, in rising from the rubble, Maria discovered a powerful truth. Broken dreams could serve as the foundation for a more genuine, self-determined future. In the end, she transformed a devastating betrayal into an unbreakable will, resolved to live fully and authentically. Her story an enduring testament to resilience and renewal. And there you have it, the twists and turns of Maria Delgado's remarkable journey from unsuspecting wife to triumphant phoenix. She discovered the power of self-reinvention in the face of heartbreak and high-stakes drama, proving that even the deepest betrayals can ignite a fierce determination to rise. Jacob Delgado's downfall and Annalise Winslow's vanishing act became cautionary tales whispered throughout Manhattan's elite circles, while Maria's name was etched into the city's lore as a resilient survivor who refused to back down. She built a new life that honored her past, but never allowed it to define her future.